What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name's Greg. Thank you so much for watching and supporting us. We really appreciate you guys. Got a great video for you guys today on some new Arizona fraud. Arizona is my home, and I'm definitely more than happy to get as much Arizona stuff out there as we possibly can. So let's dive right into this. So they found an abandoned school bus in Arizona. ATF and police show up and open it, and guess what? It has voting machines and ballots in it. Both things. The bus had no school plates, and the plates that were on it were from Nevada and were dated back to 2006. It was abandoned by a Shell station in the Sonoran Desert, like literally the middle of nowhere. This is Interstate 85 south of I-10 in Maricopa County. The bus had dark tinted windows and brown paper that was very thickly taped over the inside of the back bus door, the little emergency exit. The purpose for that is because the windows were basically low enough to see in, so they had that back door where the window's a little bit lower, they had that blocked off so that you wouldn't see the voting machine. I gotta think that an abandoned bus in the desert is eventually gonna get looked at by someone and discovered, so I don't know how many days that little cardboard blocked someone from actually investigating that, but I'm sure it wasn't that many. They said they didn't know if it was from Nevada and it brought stuff into Arizona because of the plates, or vice versa. If it was from Arizona and it had brought stuff into Nevada and then been brought back. They said they honestly weren't sure, but regardless, those are two very important states. So whether the ballots were coming in from Arizona or Nevada, like I said, or vice versa, either way, it's a big, big discovery. They did say, though, that they do think that because it did have that outdated plate that it was from Nevada. Personally, I kind of think it could go either way. But like I said, regardless, the main thing is they found it, and it's either helping Arizona or Nevada, both states that we want help in. And obviously, if it's a school bus full of ballots and machines, that could be a lot of ballots. So very curious to see what else they find from just going through that bus. I'm sure they'll run into something that gives them a little bit more of a clue of its origin and how it ended up there and who put it there. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please like, share, comment, subscribe if you honest and fair election process. It's like he said, we just want the legal ballots counted and the illegal ballots not counted. It's not that hard to do. So yeah, like I said, thank you so much for watching. Please check out our PayPal and merch store. If you feel like supporting us, a lot of our videos get demonetized, so we do really appreciate that. And stay tuned for more videos.
In Arizona, state lawmakers have begun to take action on election integrity. The state legislature has just called for an audit of Dominion software and equipment used in Arizona's most populous county.
In a press release published on Friday, the Arizona State Legislature announced an independent audit of the Dominion software and equipment that was used by Maricopa County in this year's election. The audit was called by the current Senate President Karen Fann and Speaker of the House Rusty Bowers, both Republicans. The GOP controls both chambers of the Arizona legislature. Incoming Senate Government Chair Michelle Ugenti-Rita and House Majority Leader Warren Peterson, both of whom are Republicans, joined them. The Maricopa County Board of Supervisors agreed to the independent audit. In the statement, House Majority Leader Warren Peterson said that a significant number of voters believe that fraud occurred, and with the number of irregularities, it is easy to understand why. Especially concerning are the allegations made surrounding the vendor Dominion. It is imperative that the county immediately do a forensic audit on the Dominion software and equipment to make sure the results were accurate. The legislature's decision to audit voting software and equipment comes after the public hearing on election integrity this Tuesday. Multiple witnesses and experts testified on election fraud in front of 9 Republican state legislators.
A polling manager in Fulton County, Georgia, told state legislators that while she was counting ballots, she came across a batch that were pristine. None had been folded and all appeared to be exactly the same. She says they could have been scanned copies.
My name is Susan Boyle.
Suzanne Boyles has worked as a poll manager for over 20 years.
She told the Georgia Senate committee during a hearing Thursday about an odd batch of absentee ballots that caught her attention during the Georgia recount.
Most of them were pretty worn until we came up to a batch that is, it was, my words were pristine. It was white. It was so white. And this is a typical absentee ballot. You can see how when it comes to you in the mail, how it's got many folds in it. These had no folds.
Boyle said what first struck her about these ballots was the feel of the paper. She said when you have counted and held ballots for as long as she has, you know the feel of them, and compared it to knowing the feel of a genuine versus a fake dollar bill.
But the thing that really jumped out at us, besides the feel of these ballots, besides there were no folds, was the fact that the first one that was bubbled in had almost a little eclipse of white in the bubble where you would bubble in.
She noticed that the markings on the ballots all looked exactly the same, with the white eclipse around the filled-in marking. Boyles had also previously written a sworn affidavit that 98% of the batch in question were for Joe Biden. The affidavit was included in Attorney Lynn Wood's lawsuit against the Georgia Secretary of State.
What we began to notice was an overwhelming amount were exactly, not possibly, but exactly the same.
And in the middle of the stack, Boyle said they found a single ballot that appeared to have been pulled from a printer or copier too soon because the image wasn't aligned properly on the paper. A state lawmaker questioned Boyles on whether the pristine nature of the ballots could be explained by the duplication process.
Well, couldn't that be explained by the fact that they were all personally replicated and duplicated with observation by individuals working that same poll?
Well, the probability of that, I would think, is very slight, because why would 98 ballots have that little white eclipse on the very first presidential ballot? Why would all of them be exactly the same? It was very easy to see that a ballot had been replicated many times.
She said it looked like the rest of the ballots were copies that had been marked by a printer or scanner, which could explain why the markings weren't properly aligned, leaving the white eclipse inside the bubble. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
A former lieutenant general of the U.S. Air Force has a message for the American people. He says there's not just election fraud taking place, but acts of treason. He's calling on the president to declare a national emergency and arrest the perpetrators. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more.
Is he part of the deep state?
Former Lieutenant General Thomas McInerney has come out on the record alleging that treason against the nation is taking place surrounding the presidential election. He says the attempt to steal the election from President Trump is the largest cyber warfare activity in the world. McInerney says there are two groups involved, both the foreign states of China, Russia, and Iran, as well as U.S. citizens.
This is 6 to 10 states bonding together to manipulate their data to take control of the U.S. government and the chief executive officer, the commander-in-chief. So this is not anything to be taken lightly. It's not dirty politics or tricks. It is treason by the very nature against the United States government and the people of America.
A cybersecurity expert signed an affidavit saying TV news stations reported the counting stopped in 5 swing states the morning after the election. He calls this highly unusual and says it may indicate prior coordination, but says they did not stop counting and did so behind closed doors, demonstrating collusion to get the results they wanted in secret. General McInerney outlines a 5-fold plan for tackling what he calls a national emergency.
Initiate the Insurrection Act, declare martial law, suspend habeas corpus, and set up military tribunals. Those are the things that must be done in this emergency. It is a national emergency of whether we're going to continue forward as a democratic republic or going to a totalitarian society.
General McInerney's plan starts with the president declaring a national emergency as per Trump's 2018 executive order on foreign interference with the election. Then he suggests implementing the Insurrection Act to quell potential riots by Antifa and BLM, who he says will want to create chaos if Trump wins. then declare martial law, suspend habeas corpus, and set up military tribunals to arrest and try those who participated in the steal, people he's identified but can't disclose. He says the problem must be solved now or never.
And if we don't solve it now, it'll never be solved, because we will move into a tyrannical situation that will eventually be, whether you can call it social democrats or communists, it's gonna be both the same, it's just a different name.
What's more, General McInerney said the vote-switching applications Hammer and Scorecard were in use in this election, as well as in 2016. He says Dominion Voting System's central server farm was moved to Frankfurt, Germany, where rogue elements of the CIA had it. U.S. Special Forces then seized it, and he says the White House has confirmed the U.S. has possession of them. He says he does not know whether or not there were casualties during the seizure. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Fraud in the 2020 election has been widely censored across social media platforms, but one nonpartisan website is giving people the ability to acquire and share information all in one place.
Shortly after Election Day, a citizen coalition launched a website called everylegalvote.com. The website is uncovering incidents of fraud and their impacts on the 2020 election. Host of the Economic War Room and co-founder of Every Legal Vote, Kevin Freeman, says they don't ask for donations.
That's not our purpose here. Our purpose here is almost a social media sharing site, so that people who are experiencing electoral fraud or are just interested in clean and fair elections are jumping on, because Twitter and Facebook and so many of the other social media sites have blocked any stories.
According to Freeman, Every Legal Vote has been getting thousands of reports from people who thought that election integrity was compromised. Everyday voters who witnessed unusual circumstances stepped forward, along with MIT statisticians who found there was no logic behind the voting data. Freeman said there will be a new report coming out soon showing the questionable method in which Dominion voting systems tabulated votes.
It's not the normal common sense way that you'd say, oh, here's a vote for Trump, we'll count one here. Here's a vote for Biden, we'll count one there. It is a very complex, convoluted way for them to record votes, and yet it leaves open the possibility of changing votes from one candidate to another.
Some of the reports have not been made public on their websites because people are afraid of retribution or legal teams might want to examine it. Freeman is asking for patience and for people to understand there could be nefarious groups trying to manipulate the U.S. election system. Reporting by Sherry Dong and Don Schran.
Georgia attorney Lynn Wood claims that the Chinese regime sent Dominion $400 million ahead of the election. That's through a Swiss bank subsidiary. There's no direct proof of the claim, but public information does show ties between China, the bank, and Dominion.
Attorney Linwood claimed on December 1st that Communist China purchased Dominion Voting for $400 million. He published a link to a U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission filing showing Dominion Voting Systems' parent company receiving $400 million from a Swiss bank subsidiary. The transaction itself does not directly show what the attorney alleges it to be. However, it does show ties between the voting software company and the Chinese regime. The transaction happened less than a month before the election. According to a press release, the party that received the money, Staple Street Capital, acquired Dominion Voting System in 2018. The acquirer calls itself a New York-based middle-market private equity firm. The party that paid the money is UBS Securities LLC, a subsidiary of Swiss investment bank UBS. But UBS is not necessarily the eventual buyer in the transaction. As an investment firm, it could have just served as a middleman, selling partnership interests of Staple Street Capital to UBS clients or holding it on behalf of clients through its prime broker. So how is this related to the Chinese Communist Party? In another Twitter post, Linwood claims the Chinese regime to be the major shareholder of the middleman UBS Securities. Through state entities, China does own much stock of UBS's Beijing-based joint venture. But the joint venture's name is UBS Securities Co. Limited, whereas the entity sending money to Dominion is UBS Securities LLC, which is based in New York. The New York subsidiary is a private firm, so its shareholders' information is not open to the public. However, a closer look into the New York subsidiary shows that among 4 of its board members who are appointed by shareholders, 3 appear to be Chinese. One of them is Ye Xiang, a Chinese national who also served as a board member of the Beijing-based UBS. The person had worked at the Chinese regime's central bank, the state-owned Bank of China, as well as the Hong Kong government's financial regulatory agencies. UBS is the first foreign bank that's allowed to have a fully licensed security joint venture in China's very restricted financial market. The facilitator of the joint venture is Chinese Vice Premier Wang Qishan, who is deemed the most finance-savvy communist official. He was the mayor of Beijing in 2006 when he met with UBS's then-chairman Marcel Ostell. According to a Chinese company profiling website, after the 2020 election, the Beijing UBS went through a major leadership turnover on November the 30th. One day before Lin Wood's tweet about UBS, 12 out of its 15 board of directors quit, including Ye Xiang, the New York UBS board member mentioned earlier. Another who just quit the board is Cheng Yixun, the former CEO of UBS's Beijing-based joint venture and an expert hired in the Chinese Communist Party's Belt Talents program. The U.S. Senate deems the program a threat to U.S. national security. According to the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, UBS is among the major Western banks that played a key role as middlemen in helping Chinese communist officials set up trusts and companies at offshore centers, usually associated with hidden wealth. The SEC filing shows only 2 transactions related to Dominion's parent company. Both are from UBS's New York subsidiary. Other than the $400 million transaction in October, Dominion received $200 million from UBS in 2014. In a previous voter fraud lawsuit filed by Sidney Powell, a former military intelligence official claimed in an affidavit that Chinese operatives had access to Dominion voting system in several key states. Penny Zhou, NTV News.